Hello and welcome to the Transcendence Podcast. This is your host, Jessica Alstrom, and today I am doing a podcast called Self-Abandonment. And self-abandonment is something that by the end of this podcast you will understand rootly why you have pain in your body, why you have relationship issues, why you have money problems, why you have issues with time, why you have resistance of your planet and the people in it. And hopefully this will be able to set you free a little bit, because I like to always give tools in my podcasts on how, once we become aware of something that has been unconscious, that we can bring consciousness to it at the end of the podcast. That is my intention every single time I sit down with this microphone. And, if anybody of you guys have been following my podcast in the past, I did a podcast called, How to Heal Your Broken Heart. And at the root of self-abandonment is always a broken heart. And as we get into how you have abandoned yourself throughout your life, what you will realize is that all chaos, all anger, all frustration, all resentment, all guilt and shame, all humiliation has literally taken you away from yourself. Because when you feel any of these emotions, you begin to feel unworthy. You begin to not identify with who you believe you are inside. You start to dislike your authenticity. You begin to judge your behavior and your natural essence. And as you do these things by watching collective consciousness and observing parents and being, judged by others in the beginning of, being surrounded by people who didn't know how to love you properly, you begin to disidentify with yourself. And as you do that, you self-abandon. So most of us on the planet, if we have a broken heart running at a program level, which what that means is that, your conscious mind is always consciously creating, which means that the conscious mind has an attention span of about between 6 and 8 seconds. And now you can see how we do not create our reality with our conscious mind, because in order to consciously create, we have to hold focus. If anybody has studied quantum mechanics, you understand that how you build and shift reality is through personal energetic focus. And you cannot create anything without the focus point, which means that you have to hold focus if you're going to create something. And it is impossible to focus long enough to create form just using the conscious mind. And so what happens is, by default, we use the subconscious mind to create. And the subconscious mind can hold and run a program from the very moment that the program is downloaded. So what's happening is, in your hard drive, in your computer, in your biological body, what is taking place is every time you've had an experience that you associated, identified, or absorbed yourself in, it became a program. Kind of like an app that goes on your smartphone or a program that's running on your computer. And it is always running in the background, no matter if you're focused on it or not. It is playing constantly. So every emotional trauma that you've had, everything you've witnessed, everything you've experienced, everything that you've associated yourself with is still running at a program level, as in kind of like an app in the subconscious of your mind. And now, because it's constantly running 24 hours a day, it is a focus point, which means that it is a story that's being generated energetically from your body and from your mind that is speaking directly to the universe. And so today we're going to be talking about self-abandonment, and hopefully you can understand at the end why you've been so hard on yourself is only because you haven't understood that at some place in your life that you abandoned yourself and left all these programs running, and now these programs are speaking to law of attraction, and law of attraction is answering by default what's running at a subconscious and unconscious level, which is why you can say you want something and then viscerally create and experience something the opposite of it, or something bittersweet, or you get a little taste of it, but then it's taken away. And of course, I've spent many, many hours doing podcasts on law of attraction and manifestation, and my book that's about to drop in December is all about basically how to create, and the cheat codes and the secrets behind all of that, and how to do it very, very quickly. Because if you're like me, you want to figure out what programs are running, deactivate those programs, neutralize those programs, and download programs that are going to be serving the higher perspective of you, which means things that are going to make your computer go faster, things that are going to lighten you up, things that are going to create more intuition to flow, access to the quantum field of possibilities. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to dive into self-abandonment. And I'll ask you, if you look over your life, any time that you have felt abandoned, the root underneath you feeling abandoned is first you abandoned yourself. Now, you could have done this in the womb. You could have done this at a year old. You could have done this at 2 years old. You could have noticed something in your environment and it felt like a contradiction of who your authentic self was. But the power of influence to be loved by someone else, you handed over your personal authenticity. You handed over who you were. You handed over what you thought and believed and felt intuitively love was. And you started behaving in a way that was outside of yourself. And that is the first level of self-abandonment, is when you become what someone else needs versus what you need. When you behave in a way that is out of alignment with your soul song or your soul signature or your authentic beingness. And most of us do this really young. So I would say that probably 99.9% of the planet has self-abandoned at some point if they came in, without being totally awake and totally enlightened, which I don't think is really part of the journey to come in fully enlightened unless, they're here for a very specific task, because part of the fun here is to be completely enlightened and then drop down into the total sleepy phases of the world and then wake back up, because the journey is really, really what we're here for. And so I want today for us to identify that we have abandoned ourselves, and that's why we're holding anger, and that's why we're holding resentment, and that's why we're holding the soul wounds. So I did another podcast called Soul Wounds, and I would recommend, because I'm not going to go into the contradictive side of the soul wounds today, I'm actually going to work on the positive end of the soul wounds. And what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how from your higher self you can heal your soul wounds, because the last podcast was basically identifying them. And identifying them is not to bring a negative idea to you, but it is to bring awareness, because the more aware and conscious you are, the more ability that you have to change the programs that are running in the unconscious places. Because basically what awareness means is to make the subconscious and unconscious conscious. And that is the whole name of the game of why we are here. We are here to self-realize, which means those three aspects of ourselves, the conscious, subconscious, and unconscious, the me, myself, and I, all of those aspects, mind, body, soul. We are here to completely be aware of all of those components and have them working viscerally in the same organic, holistic flow. That is the mission of why you're here. You're not here to save the world. You're here to save yourself, which means that now you can walk in as an example and show other people that it's okay for them to save themselves and it's okay for them to heal. And then you add to that and, the world wakes up and heals very quickly. So going back to the self-abandonment, I'm going to ask you, where right now do you feel abandoned? Where do you feel unsupported? Where do you feel judged? Where do you feel like it's not fair? Where do you feel that you don't have enough? And this will take you back to a root of self-abandonment, because you are creating and generating your reality through your thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and actions. And so if you are feeling any of those right now, that is running a story, running a program that is coming from a different timeline of the past. And at the root of self-abandonment first was a broken heart, which means that you came in, say you're 1 year old, and all you are is pure light and pure joy. And all of a sudden, people start putting conditions on your love. They start putting conditions on your behavior. They start stifling you and asking you to behave in a way that fits more in alignment with their needs than your own needs. And in that moment, you break your own heart, because the heart is the connection to mind, body, and soul. It holds everything together. And as that heart begins to break, the soul moves into grief and projects self-abandonment. And now the soul resides slightly outside of the body and is constantly in contradiction. I'm going to say something that's very, very important for anyone out there who has pain. Pain is the result of self-rejection. All pain in the body is a byproduct of you not being allowed to be your natural self. Now, whether or not you're working on your conscious journey right now and you're dealing with a disease, that doesn't matter. We've got to go find the root. Right now, what you're doing is you're building awareness. You're building trust with yourself. You're learning how to stop doubting. And now, once you have those places in your conscious awareness, now we can go back and we can go and find the root cause of self-abandonment, which is the initial broken heart, which, I don't have what I need. I can't be who I need, and I'm going to go into the wounds right now. The soul wounds is I am not loved or lovable. Okay. And now we download that program based on what we observe, how we are treated, what we are seeing, how we compare to others, what we have. And so we download an observation based in that early on as cognitive beings. And so early on, if love is not unconditional, then basically what it is we are so here for the frequency of expressing, being, and sharing love that we will alter our own state of being to feel love. And so as we alter that state of being, we basically abandon. And as that begins to happen, the soul moves further and further and further through the body, and then we start to identify with what other people need us to be versus who we need ourselves to be. And our personal integrity is now no longer personal integrity, but it's group integrity, which means that I'm a good girl and a bad girl based on who I am in this group, versus instead of listening to my own GPS system, my own internal guidance systems about who I am and what's right and real for me. Now, any of you guys out here that have the crystal kids and the rainbow kids and the indigo kids, what you're seeing is that these children refuse to self-abandon. And they're pushing all of your self-abandonment buttons because they're doing things and behaving in a way where you were never, ever allowed to be. And so they are your catalyst to heal your root wound of self-abandonment. So going into the second soul wound, the second soul wound is I am not nurtured, or I am not safe. There's a third component to the nurturing element, and that is I am over-nurtured. And when a soul is over-nurtured, they do not feel safe because you're here to save yourself. You're here to love yourself. And when someone else is suffocating you with their love, their ideas, their belief systems, their religions, their overprotection, their special diet, all of these things, what happens is you stop feeling safe to be yourself. Now, if some of those things are missing, you don't have what you need. You don't have the love, you don't have the nurturing, you don't feel safe, you weren't hugged, you weren't cuddled, you didn't have love abundantly told all around you that you were loved and that you were love, then you are going to develop that soul wound of you are not safe. And so if I go back to my root wound is I am unlovable or I am not loved, then I am going to now have a really big program running at the energetic level that is going to speak the entire universe, which means every relationship, every action, everything that I'm going to experience from that moment on is going to be laced with that influence, and it's going to be constantly feeding back and proving to me that, see, I am unlovable. I am unlovable. I am not loved. I don't look like everyone else. I don't act like everyone else. And so we start running this program, and that program is speaking to law of attraction, even though consciously we're saying, but all I want is love, and all I want to do is give love. That program is too dull in its frequency to speak to the law of attraction because your attention span is only 6 to 8 seconds, which means you're saying, I am love, and then you're thinking about laundry in the same breath. So you're not holding your quantum focus long enough to generate reality and form through conscious awareness alone. It has to come from what the subconscious believes about you. And the subconscious is where all of your inner child stuff is, and which is why we do so much inner child work in class, is so that we can basically reprogram your child into knowing that you are love and connecting your soul back to your inner child so that you can stop running that abandonment issue program. Now, if you're not feeling safe, say you're over-nurtured or you're under-nurtured, then you're also going to have commitment issues. And this is going to project into your life and into it's not safe to commit, and it's not safe for people to commit to you. So you sabotage relationships, or you end up sabotaging relationships only because you've got that program running at an energetic level. So let's go into the next soul wound, which is I am not seen for my authentic self. And I see this every day. And we all know, if you listen to my podcast about the soul wounds, what the characteristics of that, so I won't jump into that. But when I am not seen, that means that I don't matter, really. And so I'm going to manifest all different perpetrator and victim energies around that particular program, and I'm going to run it, which means that no matter what, I'm not seen. I'm not seen in my relationships. I'm not seen for the work that I do. I'm not getting the promotions, or I'm not getting the jobs, or I'm not getting the relationships, or the relationship is a narcissist, or fill in the blank. And so when we have that soul wound, that is another form of self-abandonment, because we are not seeing ourselves. Now you can see that once we decide that we cannot be the organic, authentic being of love that we came here to be at 1 year old, we self-abandon, and now we need mom to love us and dad to love us, and they never can do the job that we need them to do because we're here to love ourselves. And then maybe they're over-nurturing us and under-nurturing us, or overprotective or underprotective, or no guidance or too much guidance, or fill in the blank. But what we do is when we need the nurturing element, which means our personal safety of how we feel in our body and in our world, when we need that from someone else, we self-abandon. And your parents will prove to you right away that you can't do it, that you're little, that you're small, that you don't matter, that, you don't know what's best for you. Stay out of your imagination. That's not there. All of these things. You need to do this to be a good person. This is what a good person does. This is what a good girl does. This is how a good girl behaves. Self-abandonment, self-abandonment. Because here you are wanting love, wanting to feel loved. So you give up your own initial GPS of understanding that you are love in exchange for a false perspective of feeling inadequately loved and nurtured. And so as we go into the soul wounds, we know that being seen and being heard are the last two soul wounds. And being heard is your truth. It is your purpose. It is your voice. It is how you show up for the world. And when you're not heard, what you're going to notice is that you are going to attract program after program after manifestation where you are not heard. And you'll understand that when you talk to someone who tells you the same story 1,500 times. They are not heard. They need to be heard. They need to be heard. And so what we do from a place of self-abandonment is the soul is always trying to reconnect with you. So the soul will actually help the body-mind perspective manifest situations where you can find yourself, where you can get your power back, where you can love yourself, where you can connect with back to yourself. That's why probably there's been times in your life where everything has been taken from you. Everyone has walked away from you. Your job has been taken away. You've lost all of your money. And your soul has manifested these big wake-up calls for you so that you can realize that no matter what is taken away, you still have you. And this is how the soul is using tough love to rebond you with that abandonment that you've done. Because when everything is taken away from you and you realize the only person you've ever had was you, then what you do is you reconnect with yourself. And so self-abandonment is actually the programs run by keeping yourself in a series of codependent relationships, codependent ideas, codependent friendships, and codependent jobs, and all these things where you've completely self-abandoned away from your own natural intuitive system and intuitive heart system and intuitive love for yourself, and you've now replaced it with needing it from every single other person in the world. And I'm sure you can relate to some point with this, because I can sure relate to this at many levels, and this is how I lived most of my life until my 30s. And it was all about getting it from outside of myself, because I had initially abandoned me. So take a breath, because this is really at the root of where we are in our sexuality class right now in Tika. And we are moving back into the I am, which is, I am the universe. And you cannot be the I am the universe and be in your ego. And so we're learning how to reconnect and heal this self-abandonment and look at the soul wounds and figure out how to create power and safety in these wounds, which means that we are going to tonight, apparently, in class, which is what I'm getting right now, is we're going to go in and heal all 4 of our soul wounds with our higher self tonight. And what that's going to look like as it's coming through right now is that I'm going to take my first wound and I'm going to say, I am unloved or I am unlovable. And now I'm going to say that again, but before I say it, I am going to drop down into my heart space and I'm going to connect with my higher self and I'm going to feel the essence of the bigger part of me and I'm going to say that again and I'm going to ask myself, is that true? And if it's not true, then I'm going to say, how can I feel safe loving myself? Because again, at the root of every program that's running is a safety issue. It's a survival issue, which means everything that you're doing that you're in sabotage of right now is coming from protection of yourself or a safety mechanism, which means you're trying to stay safe in your lack of motivation, depression, anxiety, and self-sabotage. You are keeping yourself safe somehow from your own broken heart by keeping yourself away from love. And so when we go back and connect with love through our higher self, we can look at that wound very differently and we know what we need to do to heal the body and the mind in that and basically turn off that program, because that program no longer serves us when we're in higher self, because the higher self is the I am. The me is my ego. And so when we don't need that, we need the I am. We look at the I am not loved from the I am, and we say that's impossible because the only one that ever needs to love me is me. And so we actually go through and we change that program as a class and go into the next one and go into, I am not safe, which is probably 80% of the collective that is running that program at their energetic body point. And so what our job is from higher perspective, higher self, we need to create a safety plan for ourselves. For when I was doing all of my healing wounding work about 5 years ago and going down deep into my subconscious and unconscious and childhood work, I created a safety list for myself of things that made me feel safe in the moment. Because when you're having an anxiety attack or when you're, when you feel so utterly afraid of your circumstance, then I had a laminated safety list. It sounds silly, but it was like basic things like, my pillow makes me feel safe. This blanket makes me feel safe. This type of food makes me feel safe. This person makes me feel safe. When I breathe, it makes me feel safe. And I had like a safety checklist that I would check in. But when you're in higher self, you don't need that checklist, but it is nice to have, especially if you're dealing with anxiety and fear and the empathic nature of being connected to the planet and all the people and animals in it. So depending on your level of safety issues, your higher self needs to create a survival plan for you that is not based in survival, but into thriving and expansion, which means when I'm in my higher self, I always feel safe. So I know that when I don't feel safe, I am not being that higher perspective of myself. And my job in the moment is to do 2 things: locate higher self and spend 3 minutes as her. Or if I cannot, for some reason, energetically get to that frequency because it's too high and my vibration is too low, then I'm going to take 5 deep breaths and I'm going to ask myself, what does my inner child need right now? Because there are 2 aspects of you. There is your wounded inner child and there is your unlimited superhero self. And anywhere in between, you can connect with either one of those and you can totally love, nurture, see, and hear. So what our job is actually in this podcast is to work through our self-abandonment issues by loving ourselves, by nurturing ourselves, by seeing ourselves, and by hearing ourselves, which means hear your truth. Hear why you're on the planet. What pisses you off and what makes you feel alive and what makes your blood burn and what turns you on and what excites you and what passion. You need to hear yourself. Stop listening to society about what you need to hear for you. You need to see yourself past the flaws and the scars and the imperfections and the limitations and see the power and the greatness within you. And as you do that, you heal this self-abandonment and then the world stops abandoning you. And you're going to do this with each wound. You're going to love yourself the way you have never been loved. The soulmate you seek is you. You're going to provide a level of safety that is so big and so powerful that safety would not even enter your mind, because all you do is live in possibilities and the unknown, and that is the safest possible place that you could be. And this is how we heal our self-abandonment issues. Because if you're feeling abandoned, no one has abandoned you. You have abandoned yourself, and now you are reflecting that back from a projection of someone else in order to see it clearly so that you can heal the program that's running at an energetic, subconscious, or unconscious location. So this is what we're doing in class tonight. Very, very cool. And, when you're dealing with self-love issues or freedom issues, because freedom resides in the safety factor. If you're dealing with any sort of I cannot be free program running, it is coming from a safety issue. If you have money issues, it's coming from a safety issue. If you have body problems, it's coming from a I don't love myself issue, or I have abandoned myself, or I am rejecting myself. If you are not seen and heard, you will have all sorts of manifestations of that. People will just blindly walk past you, forget your name, or they will give you too much attention and cause you to have anxiety. Again, ego works in perpetrator and victim energy. So you're either perpetrating your wound or you're victimizing your wound, but you're playing out the same program over and over and over again. And it's really time to break the patterns. And as you break the patterns, what happens is you realize the only person that's ever truly abandoned you was you. And I'm going to leave you there today because this was an intense one, and I would really like to move on and move into this powerhouse of creation of solar plexus that we're moving into in 2017. And if anything, this election is showing us is that we are all ready to be our own mothers and fathers in our own government, and we can do this better than anyone else. And let the emotion that has come up from this election come up and empower your purpose, because a lot of times our pain is what births our purpose. And if this election has been painful for you, then it is the perfect catalyst for you to hear your purpose, see your purpose, nurture your purpose, and love your purpose. Because this person that we put in office is only going to reflect back to you the darkest aspects of who you've allowed to lead, which has been everyone else. It's time to lead ourselves, and this is what this presidency is showing us. And so it's a beautiful moment, and I will tell you that if the other candidate had gotten elected, this process would have taken a lot longer because of the suppressive energy that was coming. And at least this energy that is coming, that has been birthed in front of us, is projecting out a very in-your-face, blunt absence of love, absence of nurturing, and absence of seeing and healing. This is your greatest wound mate that you've put into office. And so I would ask you all to use your greatest wound mate as your spiritual teacher to decide what you want from the contrast and move back into that place of power and open up that shelter and open up that school and build your practice and start healing your body and start working on other people, because no one is going to take care of us anymore. And that is the truth of why we felt abandoned our whole lives, is because no one has ever showed up for you the way that you need to show up for you. All right. If anybody's interested in learning more about our programs, go to our website, www.transcendencekc.com, and look for TICA, T-I-C-A, which is our International Consciousness Academy. I've got tons more videos and podcasts for learning, and I hope today you took a little nugget and you walk directly in the direction of your self-abandonment and you find, love, nurture, and heal yourself today.